All right, cool. We are live in the group. Awesome. So, welcome everybody to our cash-based practice owners interview series here in our Facebook group. This has been an awesome start to things. I've reached out to so many different owners, so many different people, and it's been great to hear a bunch of different perspectives. So, I'm really excited to introduce Ben Schiff today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are going to get into things. I know that there are a lot of people who are interested in hearing from you. I know you and I have talked a little bit about kind of like what it's like to be an employee at a cash practice. And I know for sure that there are definitely a lot of people who are interested in that, especially new grads. So if you don't mind telling us a little bit about yourself and your background, that'd be a good place to start.
Yeah. My name's Ben, and I have a practice here in Austin, Texas. It's called Axiom Physiotherapy. And I've been in business for about a year and a half now. I've been a therapist for about 10 years, almost 10 years now. And when I first got out of PT school, like many people, I joined a pretty busy orthopedic practice. And about 2 years into it, I kind of was at a crossroads of, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. It just was super busy. I was seeing like 16, 17 patients a day and coming home and just feeling like I had nothing left for myself at the end of the day. And that was kind of disheartening. At the time I was was dating my now wife, and she was living here in Austin and I was living in Tucson, Arizona. And an opportunity came up for me to move and be closer with her. And I started looking for jobs. And I don't know if you know much about the Austin market, but it's a pretty competitive job market here. And a lot of people want to move here. So it was actually a bit of a challenge trying to find a job. And I knew I didn't want to work at a very busy outpatient ortho clinic. So I was kind of picky about what I wanted to do. So I found a clinic here in Austin that was cash-based. And that was kind of, I had heard of some cash-based practices, but I wasn't very familiar with them. So it was kind of a new concept to me. And she had a year waiting list to come in and see her. So she was obviously really good at what she did. And she'd been a practitioner probably for around 30 years. And so I became her apprentice, essentially. And that was a really cool experience. And I learned a lot about good things about how to run a practice and not so good things about to run a practice. The good things is that you got to learn from a skill standpoint, which I was really interested early in my career to becoming a really good therapist, was you just got years of experience to work with. And we have really challenging cases. So these are really chronic pain patients that have been to 3 therapists, 5 chiropractors. They see their psychotherapist. They're really more challenging people, but I kind of like that. But, after doing that for about 3.5 years, I was kind of tired of being an apprentice. It was like, when is this going to end? When am I going to not be an apprentice? And I would say that if you're a young therapist and you're thinking about joining a practice, just be mindful of the dynamic that you're in when you're going into these practices. Because if you're with an experienced therapist with a really big following, sometimes the patients might not want to see you. They want to see the person that's been there for 30 years. So it's a challenging dynamic. It's a great learning experience, but you have to understand there needs to be an end to it at some point. You always don't want to play second fiddle to somebody else. Even if you're a really good therapist, you always get viewed as kind of like, well, why would I pay, $225 to come see you when I can see a person that has 30 years experience? And it's not their fault that they have 30 years experience, and it's not your fault that you have maybe no experience or 2 years experience. But I would say those dynamics are really tricky to last long term. So I would say if you could get out of that situation sooner than later with a good amount of knowledge and do your own thing, that'd probably be a good place to go. And then my second experience was actually working here in Austin for a cash pay practitioner that probably a lot of you guys know is Carter Physiotherapy with Jared Carter, and he's been in the cash pay world for a long time now. Him and Aaron LeBauer are probably the first 2 guys I heard online with cash practices out there really into that. And that was an interesting experience in itself. It was more business focused than say clinical focused, because I had already kind of got the clinical aspect of things. And I was looking to get some business acumen because, in PT school, we just get almost none of that. I don't know what your experience is, but I got so little business acumen that I just didn't know much. And so that was interesting to see how marketing and sales worked. And but the it was still paying cash. So it was kind of a similar dynamic. So it was a fairly easy transition. But it presented with challenges too. We were trying to grow a practice, and our rent was very high. And it's one thing, you look around, you don't see a lot of multi-practitioners at a cash practice. You don't see people with 7, 8 therapists and having multiple clinic sites. If they do, it's pretty uncommon in my experience.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time, it works with a solo practice or with some contractors. So you have to really think, if you're going to start a cash practice. The idea of, do you start with the end in mind? Is that how big do you want to grow it, and what's the realistic option that you're going to have 3 or 4? Do you want 3 or 4 clinics all charging cash? There's people that do that, but in my experience, they're few and far between, and it's challenging. And if you're going to ask people to pay the kind of money that we ask, it's hard to. It's much more different than saying, "Well, I'll start taking insurance," and that's different. And now, as insurance changes, that changes, but it presents its own challenges. So I would say the challenges that we ran into there were, our rent was really high, and
Mm-hmm.
you don't want to grow too quickly. And I think that was probably one of the issues we ran into, is that we did struggle for quite a while getting enough patient volume to justify the rent, because we had more rooms that we needed, that we just couldn't fill with other therapists, and that presented some real challenges. So I would say, if you're a new grad or you're new as a therapist, when jumped into the cash world, I had 2 years experience, so that was kind of a little different approach, but still pretty early on in your career. Was that it was you really got to understand the dynamic you're getting into, and the sooner I think you can get what you need out of that place and then move on to your own thing is probably the better situation, because sometimes the pay structure is not great, or you get a certain percentage of what's being charged, and that's a really important piece too. I think that should be expanded on in our conversation. So it was 2 really good experiences that kind of led me to this. It probably took me
Mm-hmm.
longer than I probably should have to get to this point, but I figured, if they were going to pay me that amount of money at the other place, why wouldn't they pay me here?
Yeah.
If you keep your overhead low, which I think is the most critical component, whether you're a mobile person, obviously it's easy to keep it low. If you have just a small space like I do with a private waiting room, the rent's very reasonable, and just charge enough to make it worth your while, that if a pandemic hits, you only have to see 10 or 15 patients a week, and you can still make money doing what you're doing. So it's kind of my background into it. And it yeah, I've spent 8 of the past 10 years just doing cash. I could never go back to a regular clinic ever.
That's
They wouldn't have me actually at a regular clinic, because they would ask too many questions, and it just wouldn't work. I'd say, once you do this, it's unless the something was so drastic that I had to do it, I would. But given a choice, I don't think I could ever go back and work in a traditional PT clinic again, just because the volumes are. I mean, I see so many patients that have come from those clinics. That's why they're coming to see me, and the therapist is great, but they're just they're spread thin, and
yeah.
it's the one I really value, the one-on-one care, and I enjoy using, and I do a lot of manual therapy in my clinic too. So it's kind of hard when you're in a busy ortho clinic to do a lot of hands-on, because you're just usually running from one patient to the next, and just the idea. Like, my dad had to get physical therapy a couple months ago, and he went for 10 sessions. And you could just take a guess, maybe how much it cost for him to go to. This is a hospital-based system at Oklahoma. Could you guess how
Mm-hmm.
much they charged him for 10 sessions of PT? Like, just take a guess. What do you think?
Uh, Gosh, I have no idea, because I feel like I've seen so many like different
Yeah,
prices and like different co-pays, and I have no
eight
idea.
$8,000 for 10 sessions. So
Oh my God.
so think about that. He came into the clinic. He had shoulder pain. They put him on a UBE for 7 minutes. They
Yeah.
did some stem and stuff that you would do. That stuff that I'm surprised that people still do. Um, but since our hospital system, they charged him 8. So he called me and he said, "Does this seem unreasonable?" And I said, "Do you have to even call me to ask if that's unreasonable?" I said, "I would never pay that bill." But that's what you're dealing with in our healthcare system. $8,000 for 10 sessions. I could have seen him for 1 or 2 visits, and it would have been significantly better at a fraction of that cost.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it's why I do what I do, because our healthcare system is not great, and it's probably why you do what you do, because you can provide the care that you couldn't otherwise in a busy kind of place. And it's probably why, if they're a young therapist, especially the young therapists that are looking to kind of break out from their ortho jobs, I know them. And at the end, if they want to reach out to me, I'll give them the most free advice and the most honest advice too, because I think there's a lot of people out there maybe not giving the most honest advice when it comes to these things. Just really transparent and be like, this is what it's probably going to be like.
Hmm.
But I wish I would have had somebody tell me that years ago, because it would have
Yeah.
saved me a lot of time and headache, and probably gotten me sooner to owning my own practice than later.
Yeah.
I think you just need the confidence and understanding that, people will come. You're good at what you do, and you spend a lot of time in school. You just got to be comfortable with selling your services, and don't worry about that kind of stuff. So
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think it's unfortunate that in a lot of the PPT curriculums, there aren't really a lot of like business courses. Like I remember, I've talked about this on here before, but I remember my business class that I had. We like they told us that we could make like a budget of however much money we wanted. It had to be brick and mortar, and then we could see like whatever niche we wanted, but then it also still had to be ortho anyway. And I think that's just like it's crazy. It's
yeah,
no practice is really run that way, based on what I know.
I don't think maybe some of these people that teach at universities, have maybe not in the. I don't know. It's been a while since maybe they graduated. They've been out of the system, so that's stuff that they were taught back in the day. But
Yeah.
there's just it's a different time. So there's people that are out there, in the cash world that are filling these spots with education. But I also think people
Hmm.
need to really know too, like what are they really getting into? It's like if you're going to sign up for, some platinum course from somebody, like you really got to understand, does this person really have the experience and the knowledge to help me get to that point in my business? And you have to
Hmm.
sift through some of the stuff. Some of the people do and some of the people don't, but you've got to take a close eye and be kind of skeptical and go, I need to talk to some of the people they've worked with before. Is
Yeah.
this person actually helpful in that? Or did they just
Hmm.
give you kind of basic advice, like go talk to doctors, go to talk to concierge physicians, go do this? It's like, you don't need to sign up for a platinum course to do that. But I think
Right.
some of that stuff is maybe working on mindset stuff, because some people are just like, I don't know what to do. And they've read everything out there, and they know all stuff about cash. They can tell you all about it, but they won't jump in and do it. And
Hmm.
they should just do it. Especially if you got laid off from your job, and this with the pandemic, it's like there's never a better time to jump into your own thing. Even if you have to do a side hustle for a while. A lot of people do a side
Hmm.
hustle while their business is growing. That's if you're gonna do some home health gig or some contract gig, like do it.
Yeah.
It's a great way to pay the bills while you're getting your business off the ground. And before you know it, it's kind of a good feeling going to tell your other employer, like, hey, I got this thing going. I don't need this anymore, but thanks. So
Yeah.
that's where everybody
Yeah.
wants to be. Yeah.
So, like, if there was somebody who was kind of like on the fence about whether they should leave their like regular full-time job and jump into, starting their own practice, or maybe they were furloughed and they don't have a job and they're just really worried about starting their own thing, what would be like your top three pieces of advice?
I'd say have a plan B, like just because you open up a shop doesn't mean people are going to come. And if you don't know how to get people to come, and then you'll just be sitting around doing Facebook videos or some marketing thing that you kind of go, well, I hope this works. You know, um, for me, I already had enough clients to come over and join me. So it really wasn't like I wasn't that like, I was even a little worried. I was like, man, are people going to show up? And it's like, they showed up at the last place you were working. Why wouldn't they show up now? But
Yeah.
if your rent is low enough and you only need to, if you can make money seeing 10 patients a week, or 8, then you can quickly get there. But keep that side hustle going for a while. Um, Keep your overhead. I mean, that's what when I worked at the other clinic, that's what really made it difficult for us to grow. The overhead was way too. I mean, we were probably paying honestly like $3,700 a month in rent. You
Oh my
know,
gosh.
that's a lot. That's in Austin's expensive in rent. I don't know what it is where you're at, but it's like that's like 30 something dollars a square foot. It gets so you have to really factor that in. If you think you're going to grow and I'm going to have this personal trainer, I'm a massage therapist in here, maybe you grow at that rate, maybe you don't. But if you start with one room in a small private waiting room or in the back of a room of a gym and you're subletting or whatever you're doing, keep it really simple. I mean, what do you
Hmm.
actually need? Like, I have a high-low table, I have a desk, I have a treadmill, I've got some needles, I've got some equipment for making custom orthotics, and I got a waiting room. Like, that doesn't cost very much to get started. So I would always on the air on the side of being lean, especially if like things like this happen. There's plenty of therapists out there in clinics that have really struggled because their overhead is just too high, and then their patient volume got crushed by, everybody's patient volume got beat up by the pandemic. Um, so keep it, and then find people that you can trust, not because they're on the internet telling you they're good. You have to wonder, like, if they're on the internet telling you they're so good, you know, if they're so busy, why aren't they then treating a bunch of patients at a time? That's always wonder about that. Like, if they're so busy, shouldn't they be overwhelmed with their patients? So really evaluate, how many therapists does this person actually have working for them, and how much have they grown
Mhm.
their practice? Those are questions that should be asked, and asked to speak to their other clients. Like, if you're like, hey man, I'm thinking about taking this person's mastermind thing. Okay, give me somebody, a client I can talk to, and then you can get a
Mhm.
real truer sense of what's happening, and then you can make the best decision. Because there's a lot of people out there doing a lot of things, and you've got to filter through a lot of stuff. And so you don't want to spend a ton of money on stuff where just to give you information you probably could have gotten somewhere else. So
Yeah, yeah, that absolutely makes sense. And like, I am a huge fan of like lean startup and everything. And I think like a good way to start things too is even just to like start with telehealth. You know, you could start doing a lot of like patient education and things that are a lot more hands off.
yeah,
And like once you start making some revenue, then you can start buying equipment and things like that.
yeah. I think I had a company reach out to me recently, and they provide telehealth services across the state of Texas, and they want me to be their provider for them. So it's post surgical stuff. So it's
Mm-hmm.
really like, hey, they work with small to medium sized companies that are self funded, and they said, okay, Amy had a knee replacement and she needs PT. We'll pay you a flat rate for all of her PT. Now, some people look at that and go, man, you don't even get to, she might be in Dallas and I live here in Austin, right? And for some of these cases, they might be easy enough to work. Some of them, the cases, the person's going to need some hands-on. Like
Yeah.
if you had a major shoulder surgery and you're in a sling, and then we go from a sling to 6 weeks later to doing stuff, like you need some stuff. So that might be a little tricky for some of them, but a lot of these things could probably be managed through telehealth. And so they have a
Mhm.
platform that allows you to measure angles. They have a platform that allows you to communicate with the patient. So if they need anything at a time, and it enforces to say, like, we still value one-on-one, person-to-person care, but for companies where, like, do they, like, if somebody has an ankle sprain, sometimes I'm like, do I really need to see a simple ankle sprain? Now, if they have a soccer game tomorrow and they're a high school athlete, or that's really great, yeah, they probably need some hands-on real quick, tape them up, get them back out there. But some of these people don't. So yeah, it's changing. The telehealth thing's interesting. I would say that at first it's tricky. It is tricky to. I find connecting with people really sometimes challenging in that way at a personal level, because I work with people with such long-standing issues. Be able to
Mhm.
touch them and put your hands on them is such a great way to connect with them and get to know them at a person. It's like people wearing masks all the time. It's hard to read their face, and it's hard to really capture, like, is what I'm saying, connecting with them. But it
Mhm.
definitely has, it's proven for sure that it has its place. And the good thing is, going forward, people just have an option. Do you want to do
Right.
telehealth, or do you want to do in person? I've had people that want to start off with telehealth, and they're like, man, I want you to work on my shoulder. Like, someone needs to touch this thing hurts, and the exercises are great, but, like, can you work on it? And you're like, yeah, why don't you just come in for a session? So I think the option is definitely, I think you'll see a lot of big players probably get into the telehealth PT world, and that's probably what this company that's looking to get somebody is coming in and saying, well, can we capture these people? But there always will still people that will value, face to face, one on one care. It's even if they have to wear a mask, it's people still want to come in and get care. So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think, like you said, just having it as an option, so that like if somebody is like they can't leave their house, they can't drive or whatever, like you can
right.
still reach them and still help them. So yeah, just having it being like something that we can try to do, I think is definitely really good. And I'm glad that like more places are starting to embrace it, and see it as a real option.
Yeah,
Um, and if you don't mind answering this question, this is one question that I get all the time, and I know a lot of people here in the group are always really worried about. If you're just starting out, where do you find clients?
yeah, that's it. So if I had to go back, and I think now it's like, it was a real challenge at first to, like, if I was starting on my own and I didn't know what I knew, or didn't have the clients, it would be a real struggle. It would honestly be like, who do I go talk to? So for
Mm-hmm.
me, it's like gym owners is a great place to start. Yoga instructors, Pilates instructors, people that are in similar industries,
Mm-hmm.
and build relationships that way. And just offer to treat the owner or some other people that work there for free. That's what I did. And then you do, and then they realize how good of work, and you go and do a session, and then be nice enough to go in and do a session with them, in trade services, and then from there, and that might not yield itself a result, right away. That might take a month or two. That might take 6 months, but continue to follow up with those people. For me, working with direct primary care doctors has been, and concierge doctors is like an immediate, easy thing because people are used to paying cash for those services, just like they would for yoga or Pilates, but this is for their direct medical care. And those dynamics, I think more PTs should partner with direct primary care physicians and be in their office and be a part of their practice, because they might have 4 or 5 referral pads in the drawer and they might just pull one out and go, I don't know, go see one of these people. But if you have if you're in the same office suite and you're 2 doors down, you're not with a patient, and they go, hey, this is Amy, and Amy sprained her ankle and she's wondering if she gets some PT, like, and you're available. I mean, who are they going to choose? So I think that dynamic is there's been a lot of push back and like, well, stop relying on physician referrals. You don't have to rely on them. You can utilize them. And I'm telling you, it's like, if you're part of a transparent pricing model, which I'm a part of, and they are too, the customer always feels like they're taken care of and there's no hidden costs. So you don't get an $8,000 PT bill 3 months later from some hospital system. So when people come in, they're always going to know that this is the price of what it costs. There's never a hidden cost. And I think that model, like my own personal doctor, that's how I got to know my personal doctor really well, is that he was the guy sending us patients. And I was like, you know what? I need a doctor. So I became his patient, and I was like, that's one of the, if you want the easiest marketing tip ever, find a DPC doctor in your area and sign up to be a patient tomorrow. Go there with your cards, act like you're just a patient, get the care that you need to get. And I guarantee you're going to have patients coming in. Like, and my doctor sends me a lot of patients, and he sends other therapist patients too, which is totally fine.
That's awesome.
So that's the easiest way. I think the easiest way to get patients tomorrow is find the local DPC doc in your area, sign up immediately. My doctor's like 50 or $60 a month. It's very reasonable. And then if you want, you can find these concierge physicians, which is a little different model where people are paying quite a bit more. There's a lady here in town, and she probably charges $3,000 to $4,000 a year, and you pay up front. But she treats, very successful business people where, they don't bat an eye if it's $200 an hour, $250 an hour. They want that care. So partner up with them. I mean, those things make the most sense. And those are going to be, I think, a quicker return than, say, the yoga. Not that you shouldn't do the yoga and Pilates thing. And it depends on your niche. It's like who you going. I work with a lot of runners, so I've used to go at 6:30 in the morning on Saturdays and work with running groups. And running groups sometimes are great. Sometimes for business, they're just like the slowest rate of return ever, right? Because runners are they're like, all I need is a pair of shoes, some cheap shorts, and a shirt, and then I can go exercise. So their mentality, they're a little bit of they don't like to, they tend to not want to, if they're like an elite runner or a high level runner, they'll pay it. But runners are there's some tire kickers in those groups. So you always have to watch out for them. You don't want to spend a lot of Saturday mornings not getting a lot of return on that, because then you're just like, I'm tired of coming here. And people, they want me to massage their leg down after they're running, they're sweaty. And it's like, do I really want to, do this over and over again? So you really got to target down your niche and then go after that. If you're in pelvic floor, it's like, go meet all the doctors in town that work with that. It's like, there's such a need for women's health and pelvic floor. It's like, if you can do a good job of that, you can have patients. I mean, you have a long waiting list if you're really good at that. So that's one of the, to me, it's like, if you're really interested in that area, that's the area that you can do it. Even like, that's the thing. We always tend to think ortho stuff, but even I think neuro cash PT could be something that's way bigger, because some of the services people get are just limited, and people don't mind paying for really good care. So I don't see a ton of that out there. There's obviously, it's out there, but it tends to be very ortho focused, right? And I think there's the possibility of peds, neuro stuff. There's plenty out there, but I think there's some great opportunities in all those areas. And then maybe join your chamber of commerce and go to some meetings there and get to know those people there, and get to know, if you're in an office suite like I am, get to know there's a bunch of psychotherapists in my office, so I get to know them, and sometimes they come in for treatment and they have patients, and it doesn't take long before you kind of get, again, if your overhead's low, you don't have to see many people before you start. You can feel like, I can quit my, but the goal is to move away from the side hustle when you can. And then when you get there, it's like, then you can really focus on growing, because it's too hard to split time for too long. And people do that for years. Oh, I do part-time here, part-time there. No, you just got to jump in. And then when you can dedicate the time, people will start to come in. And then just ask people, like your patients that come in. The easiest way to get a patient is to be like, hey, did you have a good experience? They're like, yeah. Do you know anybody else that would benefit from this? But people just don't do that. And then ask
Yeah.
everybody to write a review. Like they come into your clinic, would you be comfortable writing a review based on your experience? Like if it's crappy, then don't write a review. But if it's like a really, if it's a good experience,
Uh-huh.
here's a Google link. Don't do Yelp. I'm not a big fan of Yelp, but here's a Google review link, and you can fill it out. And people read reviews. You get a bad review, like it takes this old adage I heard, it takes 10 good reviews to overcome one bad one. So it's like,
Wow.
reviews are important. But the problem is like people are doing a pretty good job with reviews now. It seems like you go on the PT websites and if they're a small category, like a lot of them have just 5 stars. Like, and so does that make you, I always get a little suspicious and I'm like, they have 100 5-star reviews. I don't know if I believe that. So maybe you throw in a couple 4-star reviews every once in a while. Like the parking situation wasn't great, 4 stars.
Hmm.
But the therapist was awesome, because it gets whenever I see 5 stars all the time, I'm like, I get a little suspicious. I'm like, they can't, not everybody had an amazing experience. It makes me a little bit suspicious. Throw some that's my advice is throw in some 4-star reviews to mix in with all your 5 stars so it makes people less suspicious of you.
Yeah, that's a good tip for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, if somebody is splitting part-time, say they jumped into their own practice and they're starting to see a few people, what would you say, like, how does somebody know, like, it's time to say goodbye to their regular job?
If you start seeing that, like, that over a course of a couple of months, the case volume is just keeps slowly picking up, and you're
Hmm.
having to like decide, like, can I book this person? Can I not book this person? And you have to factor in too, what's your financial situation? Do you have a spouse? Like the only reason I was able to take the time that I needed to grow my skill set was because I had a spouse who had a stable home health, and she worked in a TBI clinic, so that we had a steady income with insurance. That's the only reason I could take the time I need. If you're not in that situation, it might take you a little bit longer to get there because you have to go, well, if I'm going to make the jump, it's like, I got rent, especially we got student loan payments. Like you have to, all those things need to get factored in. But if you're finding that you're at your main job and it's just like, you can't wait to leave at the end of the day,
Yeah.
you're scheduling people on Saturdays at your other place or at night. And then if you charge enough, one way to increase revenue is just change your prices. It's like,
Yeah.
start charging more, and then people are like, oh, I don't know. I don't know if he's going to pay. People will most likely pay. It's amazing. Like if you ask people on there, it's amazing what people like. I should charge more. I don't know why I don't. But some people charge like $400 or $500 for a session,
I know.
in certain places. And people are like shocked by that. But it's like, shouldn't we be like, good for them? Like if someone's going to pay you for it,
Mhm.
if they think that's, helpful. And then you have patients that you're like, they wouldn't, and it weeds people out, it's like,
Yeah.
if people charge $50 a session, guess what? You're going to have every tire kicker in your town coming around, and then they'd be like, "You're gonna spend an hour on somebody for $50?" It's like, dude, you went to school for way too long to be doing that. Those people can go somewhere. That's fine if they want to go somewhere else. It's good, but you want the people that are going to spend money, and then you don't have to see. I thought the whole point was not to see 15, 20
Right.
patients a day. Well, you're going to do
Hmm.
that just because it's. Oh, I'm doing my own thing, but I'm seeing 20 patients a day. I want to see like 25 patients a week.
Yeah.
There's like all these numbers that you hear out there. It's like, what's the number? And it depends if you're mobile or brick and mortar. For me, 25 is like this good number. I do a lot of heavy-handed hands-on, and getting to 25, like right before the pandemic happened, I was like right there. I was like, oh man,
Hmm.
this is great. And the pandemic happened, it was like, oh no, this is not great. It's like, but it's climbing back up, and it'll get there.
Hmm.
Some people see, like I know a PT and he sees like 35 when he's going. It's like 35, 40 in a week, and it's like, and he said, what, 225, 240. But do you just want to be there all the time? Think about your hands. Like if you're a manual therapist,
Right.
you will do your hands. You can only do that for so long before like, man, this is hurting my hands.
Right.
So for me personally, in my body, like 25 is a number that I shoot for, and it's like you can earn a good living. You can go home at a reasonable time. You can be with your spouse and your kids. I mean, that's the goal of all. I think for most people is the freedom to be able to do what they want outside of here. And working at an ortho clinic, seeing 16, 18 patients a day is never going to give you that freedom ever. It's a hard place to live for a long time. And that's unfortunately most times. If you're in a clinic in a state that reimburses well, like Alaska reimburses really well, they can see one-on-one and still make good money in their insurance. Then I don't know where you're at, but that's, here in Texas is like, that's not the case. So people open up
Yeah.
clinic. If you look on the coast, people tend to move to like Washington. And you're like, why do people move to Washington? They were living in like Arizona. It's like, look at the reimbursement rates in those states. Look at
Yeah.
Alaska. Like, right? Who's like, I grew up in Alaska. It's in the middle. It's way the hell out there. But people open up clinics here because insurance tends to reimburse well, and that's obviously changing, and that might not be viable going forward. But the good thing about cash is like you're not dependent on somebody else determining what you get. And then there's a whole, I don't know enough about out network billing to do it. There's people out there way better experts than me, but I think a lot of people discount that. Like you can get good money doing out network billing depending on where you're at if you know what you're doing. So
Yeah.
I think people should explore that more, and then be like, well, I don't want to, I don't want to call somebody and figure out how much they're going to go get paid. Let's just contract with somebody that does do that. I think Jerry Durham does that. There's people out there that help people with out network billing. Those people can be helpful for you if you'd like to go down that road. And I think people are just too scared of it or don't know enough about it, so they just tend to stay away. But maybe or maybe you take on some insurance contracts in the beginning and then you just drop them. But I'd be hesitant to do that. If people are going to pay money, like try to get them to pay cash
Yeah.
and sell it that way. And for me, it's like offering a discovery session or a free session at opening it's a really easy way for me to get to know the patient and then to get to know me and trust me, right? It doesn't have to sound cheesy. It's just like, is it a good fit? Some people come in and I'm like, I don't care if they pay me my rate. This person's not a good fit. You get to be selective about who you want to see. And so that's the freedom of owning your places, that you're like, I don't know if this is going to work, or this person's great. I get people that come in for one thing and then they come up on that and then tell me their shoulder hurts suddenly. But I knew that shoulder was hurting when they came, and they wanted to see if you were any good, but it also lets you know if you're good. Or that's a good thing about cash pay, is like, especially if you do hands-on and even movement stuff, it's like you'll find out really quickly if you're good at what you do, because people will tell you whether when they come back or they don't come back. If people don't come back, or they'll give the bit like, let me check my schedule, I got to see, and they don't follow up with you, there's reasons there. Maybe you're not what they're looking for, or they just don't think the value's there. But the good thing is when people are paying good money to see you, you'll find out really quickly if they value your service or not. So it's kind of nice.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think that's some of the best parts about this, is just like you're starting your own business so that it's better for you, it's better for your career, it's better for your patients. And I've talked to a lot of people who like starting out are like, oh, I want to work all the time, like I'll work 40 or 60 hours a week. And it's
Yeah.
like, that's not why we're doing this, you know? Um, with sales, I was just wondering if you have any tips or advice on sales and like converting leads into paying clients.
Yeah. So I would say it depends where they come from. Like I've started
Mm-hmm.
running some Facebook ads, and those ones are definitely trickier to convert because there's more tire kickers in the group, and I'm
Yeah.
new to it, so I don't really, we're trying to figure out like, are these people ideal clients? I would say if you're going to run ads, the ad guy I've been working with is trying to narrow down your area, that the people that can tend to afford your services. There's some people in that parts of town that you live in that just won't ever do that, right? So it's like
Mm-hmm.
they're not your ideal client. So like, why spend a lot of
Right.
time on that? And I think the quicker
Yep.
you realize that, the better. If you're going to chase every $50 patient, you're going to be running around a lot. So get a sense of where you're at. If you're setting up a brick and mortar, getting to know like you're there, and then for me, it's
Mm-hmm.
like the discovery session thing was kind of eye opening. When I was at first, I was like, why don't either people are going to pay me or they're not going to pay me? I don't need some discovery session. That just sounds weird. Or I think Paul Goff calls it a taster session. I was like, a taster session? That sounds weird. That sounds creepy to me. But like then I realized I was like, people needed you were charging a lot, so like people needed to know what they didn't know what they were getting, right? So they come in, they're like, you start doing some basic assessment stuff, and they're like, oh, this is not a gym, it's just a private treatment room. This is kind of good. You seem like you're a cool guy, and you know what you're doing, right? And that puts people at ease. And then that session, you can go, hey, this is how much it costs. And then you say, let's get you scheduled. And then go, I think I see patients about once a week, I give them the homework to do on their own.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want people just to pay me good money to watch them do exercise. If they want to review them in here, sure, we'll review them. And then when I do high-speed running analysis in the clinic too, and that stuff's obviously, we just pointed out, this is what you're doing, this is what you're not doing, here's the recommendations I make. But yeah, I think you have to be, the question, people, especially if you're new to this, is would you pay for the service? Would you pay the amount that you're charging? I think is the question you need to ask. And if you would not pay the amount that you're charging, then you're not comfortable with the services that you're selling. If you're like, man, I'm worth 225 all day, every day. Even if like you just do it, just tell yourself that, then people will be like, it comes through when you talk to them. And then when you talk to them, just be transparent. Sometimes people come in and you can tell it's a problem. When I go, is that too much? I go, is that too much? Like almost no one ever says, I go, is that too much? And they go, yeah, that's a problem. I said, like, well, what if we did this price? Is that okay? And they're like, that sounds great. And you give them a little bit of a discount. That person may have gone somewhere else, like never come back in, but maybe, and then they maybe come back, they come in for like 3 extra sessions than they would have before. And now you just made that money back. So if you ever get the sense of like, man, this is a finance, especially with the pandemic, people are jobs and stuff are hurting or reduced hours and wages. We have to be flexible too with that. And this idea that we think we shouldn't bump off our price just because that's our value. It's like, well, this is called basic economics, and it's supply and demand, and those things, and sometimes things change. So you have to be flexible as well. So if you get the sense that somebody can't, like, genuinely can't afford your services, which we all have those patients that you're like, this is kind of a reach for them, maybe you work with them. And some people, they pull up in a $80,000 car and they're giving you grief about the price. No, like, I don't, I know what your address, that's what's funny about intake paperwork. You ever do this? This is a little trick. People fill out intake paperwork and you're like, I just saw your house on Zillow and it's like $4 million. It's like, that's pretty, like, I think 165 is going to be, like, people don't want to admit that, but it's like, I'm in a nice part of town. I'm not in a part of town that's like, like people are really struggling. There's a reason for that, right? And it's not to say that you couldn't do it in those parts of town, because people do it all the time. I just happen to have my clinic where it is because it's just makes sense economically. So I would say, if you're not willing to pay your rate, then that's a mindset issue, which I'm sure and the group that's just looking to get started, that probably pops up about the confidence of selling your services. It's like, well, it seems like a lot. And I go, a lot to whom? Like, to you? And they go,
Yeah.
yeah, well,
Oh no. I can't hear you.
can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Okay, sorry.
that's
Um,
okay.
so, but yeah, so you have to be comfortable. That's the biggest part, right? Early on, it's like, if you go, the price is $125, like
Yeah.
what? I didn't even hear you. Like, then people are like, this person doesn't seem confident at all.
Mhm.
So you've got to be confident, and just, even
Yeah.
if you're not even that confident, just fake it. It's like,
Mhm.
when you're a new grad, it's like, you got to fake it anyways. Like, you have a
Yeah.
therapist ask you, like, how long you've been a therapist. I had a patient the first week I was a PT asked me, well, how long have you been doing this for? I said, this is my first week. And she goes, I don't want to work with you anymore. I said, great, because you sound, like, in my head, I was like, you sound terrible. And she got stuck with a student physical therapist, right? Which was weird. Like, the CI was watching her, I was like, I'm the actual physical therapist here. But she was like one of the most difficult, annoying patients. So I was like, great. But it's like, people are going to know, like, if, they just act confident, confidence
Mhm.
goes, a long way. So,
Yeah, I think so too. And like the other thing I think is important to know is that you're going to continue to come across cases like over your career where you're not going to know everything, but like you can have confidence in the fact that you don't know everything, but you are like sure as heck going to go find the answer, you
yeah.
know, and like that translates to the patient as well.
Just always be curious. Like, I've been doing this for 10 years. It doesn't mean I'm sure there's some new grad that'd be like, patient coming, he'd find things that I would never, or she would find things I would never find. It's like, you get kind of complacent. You do it a lot. You're like, oh, I've seen this a million times. It's like, well, there's times where I was like, I get 3 or 4 visits in and I was like, oh man, I screwed this up. Like, I got the wrong diagnosis. Right. And then I'll see patients, like, I had a patient come in a couple weeks ago, this kid, and he came in for a knee problem, and he had this right ankle. He's a basketball player. And I started feeling his right ankle, and I was like, dude, something's going on with your right ankle. And he was like, and when he would stand, he could not invert his right ankle and put weight on. Like, it didn't hurt. He just like, I just can't move it. And I was thinking, I have a ortho background, some certifications and that. And I was like, man, you feel like you've got like just a natural fusion in your foot. And turns out, I said, can you go get an x-ray? And so his mom's a nurse, so they got him an x-ray the next day. And they come back, and it was a tarsal coalition of his navicular and his calcaneus, which is not common at all. I've seen maybe 2 other cases like that, and they're post-surgical. And she called me. She was like, how the heck did you feel his foot? No, I said, I don't know. It didn't move. And it just felt like you just seen so many. I see a lot of foot and ankle stuff because I work with runners and do orthotics. You just feel thousands of them. And you're like, I don't know what it is, but something feels off. And so those kind of things are really helpful because, like, you've instantly gained their trust because you're like, you just diagnose the patient with just your bare hands, and then the X-ray confirmed what you had and the CT scan. So
Hmm.
like I've had those. Those don't. That doesn't happen every day. That's like every couple of years you get like a. I think this is something funny going on. Most of the cases you get are, you can take care of it and manage it. And then I would say when you can't, build up a great, when I get stuck with people, there's a guy down the street that does Prolo and PRP, and I'm like,
Hmm.
he's the guy. I mean, he travels around the whole world and teaches physicians how to do that. Get good relations. Those people charge cash, and get relationships with PM&R docs that are in your neighborhood. That's a great way. Concierge, DPC, and then the Prolo PRP guys, man, those are guys you want to get connected with, because those people pay cash for those services, and
Hmm.
those are great cross referral. Go in. I go in with my patients into the appointment with them, and I just sit in there while he does diagnostic ultrasound. And I go, "What's that?" And half the time, I have no idea what I'm looking at. I'm like, "What are you looking at?" They're like, "That's a super spinatus." So I was like, "I thought that was something totally else." Like I barely have any idea what they're looking at, but just be curious, and
Hmm.
that is a great way. Go to your if you have a patient that's seeing a doctor that you've heard good things about, go, would it be okay? And I know it's COVID, so it's like that might be a little bit challenged right now. But when things settle down, or maybe just say, hey, can I set up a Zoom meeting with potential? That's it. People contact that way. Get marketing going through Zoom meetings, but going to a physical appointment with people, that for me has worked great, because it's like, man, this person cares enough to show up to their patient's doctor appointment. Who does
Yeah.
who does that? Like, a person that wants to get patients does that, like,
Yeah.
and that genuinely cares, and like that genuinely cares about this person, like I do. And that's what's great working one-on-one. It's like the people that come to my clinic, they're people I would hang out with outside of here. They're really cool people, so it's fun to go to work with people that you would be like, well, I'd have a beer with this person. So it's not fun to go to work and half the patients you deal with are three-quarters of people you would never want to deal with. Like, no,
Yeah.
no. And I've worked, and it's like it's challenge. It's harder. You still care for them and you love them, but
Hmm.
let's be honest. It's more challenge. You want to work with your ideal clients, so it's like, why not?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. Absolutely. It makes life a lot better, more enjoyable and
yeah,
everything.
absolutely.
Um, So I have two more questions for you. Second to last question, kind of back to like businessy type stuff. I know a lot of beginners struggle with like systems and staying organized,
Right.
not just like running in circles all the time. So what do you do as a business owner that helps keep you on track towards your goals?
For me, it's like having like when I started my business, having an online scheduling option and booking from there. And I don't see enough patients to have. I don't have such a huge volume that I like. It's so hard for me to keep track. I know all my patients individually, and I know and I can reach them on cell phone at any time and text them or whatever. But if you got stuff where you're like, and it's always tricky to me, like the follow up email stuff needs to be done in a way that seems genuine. I get a lot of follow up emails from businesses. They're like, "Oh, everybody's suffering during this pandemic," and I was like, I don't care what Chick-fil-A thinks about how I'm doing during the like. It seems a little I think you have to be careful with that kind of stuff, because it can come off as very disingenuous. And think about how many emails people get from businesses that are like, "We really hope you're doing okay." And it's like, no, you don't. Like, you don't really care how I'm doing. But like, if I got a personal text from my doctor just called me, he's like, "Hey man, I got this patient I want you to see, but like he just lost his job. Is there any way that you can help him?" And I'm like, "Yeah, totally help him out." It's like, and so for me, it's about that personal follow up, which takes more time. But if you don't have like, if you're seeing like 70, 80 patients a week, yeah, that's going to be impossible. But if I remember know all of my patients, and I can go, I wonder how Joe's doing, I can just reach out and touch them. Or I just call them out of the blue and be like, I just want to check in, make sure you're doing okay. That works well. But if you're the point where you do need those things, I mean, there's tons of options out there that are automated. But I just would be, just to make it still seems personal. And it's like, like I get a happy birthday card from my dentist. I was like, do I really does my dentist really care that today is my birthday? No. He's just like, I think people, like, I sometimes we think that people aren't that smart. Like the people that come to my clinic are like the PhDs, MDs and stuff. They're smart people. And like, it's like when we write blog posts, there's this saying like, hey, write to them like they're an eighth grade level. I was like, the people that come to my place are way beyond eighth grade reading level. Like you can use big words because you're dealing with people that have like, right. Like if people,
Yeah.
you read these blog posts and they're all kind of written the same. Like you can't put more than like, you have to run on sentence. It's like, write to them like they're intelligent rather than they're like they're in eighth grade. And sometimes I think that's what happens with blog posts is like, they're like, yeah, you didn't really say anything in the blog post. You're just like fluff, fluff, fluff. You mentioned your clinic name, so it helps out on SEO. But it's like, I think connecting with people in a genuine way is sometimes it's harder but if you're running a small one person show, it's not difficult to do because you just cell phones and texting and makes things, and Facebook Messenger makes things really easy. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that is definitely good advice. I like the personal follow-up thing is something that's been working really well for me. And like by that, not only do I mean like patients are still coming to see me, but I also mean that I feel like my relationship with them are a lot better by
Yeah.
like reaching out to them personally, and it just makes me feel good, makes them feel good. And I think that's a great like business tactic, so to speak.
It's great on everybody wins with that. It's like, if you get a like mechanics are a good example. Like, no, like if you find a good mechanic, you'll be like, man, I'm gonna trust this person for life because mechanics are notoriously rip off artists, right? But nobody trusts a mechanic. But if you find a guy or a lady that's a mechanic, you're like, man, I got this person, you got to see, they're amazing, whatever. And you, even if they charge you quite a bit, but if you feel like you're taking care, that's the thing. If you feel like you're taken care of, you'll tell everybody, even if you're like, man, this guy charges a lot, but he's the best in town. That's the thing. If they go, Morgan charges a lot, but she's worth every penny, then you have a customer for life. And it's weird when
Mhm.
people pay a lot. Sometimes it's like, what does that do? That's the psychology of pricing. People are like, well, she must be great. She charges 200 an hour. Well, I don't know what you charge, but there's this association. But it's like $49. That's like, well, that's not really that much. Maybe this person isn't that good. And that's not
Mhm.
something they verbalize, but it's something that does enter into the thought process. So it's yeah, it's one of those things. I just close relationships to me. If you want to run an intimate practice that's geared towards not a huge patient volume, it's really easy to do that. And it goes and it might take 3 or 4 messages. Don't give up on the first one. Don't
Mhm.
pester. Don't pester people. Don't text people every day. Be like, Steve, how you doing? How's the knee? Just like make a little reminder on your Google Calendar, whatever, and be like, hey, text Amy. It's just don't even ask her about the pain. Like, how's your family doing? I know that your husband lost his job during whatever. Just act like you genuinely care about this person, and that goes farther than like Chick-fil-A emailing me about like how you doing during the. I don't know. Chick-fil-A is really delicious. I don't know why I'm giving Chick-fil-A a bunch of flack. But like, you think a business that you went to once and you're like emailing you 50 times about,
Yeah.
I forgot that I even put my email in that stupid tab. Like, I wish they would just lose my email. And it's like, do I really care what, this frozen yogurt place, they don't care. Let's be honest. They're just trying to get you to come back as a customer, but you care because you run a really personal practice.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I think that's a great note to end on, to just, really keep like the personal piece and like you said, like the intimacy in our practice. Like there's a reason that we are going into business for ourselves and offering an exceptional level of service, and it's for the benefit of everybody.
Yeah.
So
There's a
I think
reason
that's really great.
you're a physical therapist. Was the main reason you came into this profession, was to care for people.
Yeah.
And you can still do that and make money, and making money in the business is not bad or evil, and sales aren't evil, but you can do both. And when you can do both in a way that you feel comfortable, man, it's so freeing. That's why I can't go back to one of those clinics ever again. And they wouldn't hire. They'd interview me for 5 minutes. They'd be like, he might be good at what he does, but he sounds like he's going to be real difficult in the clinic. And so,
I know what you mean.
oh well.
Um, so last question for you, it's kind of like the self promo segment. Where can people contact you, and how can we best support you?
Yeah, you can go to my website is just axiompt.com. And then I always tell people, if they want to like Facebook message me, just look me up, or you can like, if there's a young therapist out there that wants to save themselves a lot of hassle and not knowing where to go. Do I go do this platinum mastermind? Do I do this palladium? Everybody has some palladium master. I don't know what these things are, but everybody has one. Apparently, I don't know. Apparently, I missed out. I'm supposed to have one, right? But if they just want like really unfiltered advice, and I'm not going to be like, sign up for my ebook or whatever. No, just like give you really good advice. My email is ben@axiompt.com. I'll even give you my phone number. You can text me or call me, and you can put it on the show notes or whatever. It doesn't matter to me. I don't care who sees this. but it's like, I'll give you the most unfiltered advice and just be like, this is what it is, this is what it isn't. And that way you can have the best. I wish someone would have told me that like 8 years ago before I moved to Austin. It would have saved me. I would have gotten to this point a lot sooner. And that's what I want for that person, is that most people, when they get into this thing, they're like, why? The question that statement I always make is, why didn't I just do this earlier? And the reality is that you don't need to be a 10-year seasoned therapist to do this. You got to be good at what you do, but you don't need to be doing this forever. And people take a knock on people that are like, oh, you're a brand new therapist, you shouldn't be doing this. Like, if people are going to pay you money to do this, who cares? Those people are just mad they're not doing it themselves, so they're trying to take a knock at other people. If you're good enough at what you do and people will pay you, you'll find out real quick and people will pay you. So who cares when those things? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ben. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right.
All right. Take care.
Everybody, thank you so much. Yeah.